And now we're recording. Good stuff. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming in this summer version of philosophy again. My name is Ferdinando, and alongside Yusha and Marcus, we're here to direct your conversation. Again, very quickly, since most of us are already veterans in the philosophy area, you know how the drill is. Use the chat. We go exclamation mark there. So whoever wants to speak, do an exclamation mark there. That way, we know the order who's going to be speaking first or last. As always, just be respectful of all ideas. Check us on social media, website. We have everything. Just ask and we provide. Um, yeah. So do you want to just like, oh, if you want to raise your hand, you can, but that's mostly just to add to the topic that is being written, not to add something new completely. That's the difference. All right. So with that being said, normally after my introduction, Nancy do the announcement. So is there any announcement?
Yeah, just a couple quick announcements. Again, as Fernando said, check us out on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff, and we're up to date. So yeah, that's where you can find announcements. You can see what our topics are, all that stuff. If you're interested, and this goes out even to my summer students who might be watching this video weeks later and leaving comments for extra credit. If you're interested in serving as an officer for the Philosophy Club, please contact me. Let me know. gmanzi at dcccd.edu. And yeah, I'll have my associates interview you, and if they feel as though you're qualified, you'll have the privilege of meeting with me. It's a joke. It's a joke. All right. That'll do it.
All right, good stuff. Okay, now this is the thing. The person who introduced this topic is Marcus. So Marcus, do you want to do the introduction to the topic? Since you were the one who gave us the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, Manzi, if do you think I was gonna read maybe that Boethus clip that I had shared with y'all as like a basis almost? Would that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Let me then pull that up really quickly. I can read from it.
And yes, Boethius.
All right.
Yeah,
Um, I guess what was it the premise of this conversation is he is on death row, if I remember correctly, or sentenced to death, and he's having a conversation with Lady Philosophy. Essentially just a way of questioning yourself. Um, so it begins. It's called the final diagnosis, and I'll read as quickly as I can, but I'll try to go as slow as possible as well. All right. In the next prose section, philosophy decides to ask Boethus a series of questions to test his state of mind. First, she asks him a number of questions leading up to one about how the world is governed. He is perplexed by the question and doesn't know how to respond. She next asks what the end or goal of all things is. He says that he has heard it once, but grief has dulled his memory. He does know, however, that all things come from God. Finally, she comes to the question, can you tell me what a man is? He replies, I am a rational and mortal creature. Philosophy encourages him to say more, asking whether he knows anything else about what he is. He says no, nothing. Now, she says, I know the other, in fact, the greatest cause of your disease. You no longer know what you are. And then there's this little paragraph about this comparison between patient and physician, and I'll just go through it real quick. And then the meat and butter. This exchange between patient and physician is crucial to understand Boethus' condition. Recall philosophy's initial provincial diagnosis. He has forgotten who he is for a moment. Since that initial diagnosis, she has been tirelessly laboring to help her patient remember himself. The more Boethus says, the more he reveals just how grave his condition is. When philosophy finally asks him what man is, she is not looking for the common textbook answer. Rather, she is trying to get him to remember who he is in relation to God. That is, he has an immortal soul with a destiny beyond the death of his mortal body. This is precisely what he is most deeply confused about in his own account of his situation and the prayer that follows it. With head downcast and eyes focused, he has no hope either of knowing himself or of understanding his place in the providential plan of God. And it's almost done. With her patience telling admissions of ignorance in mind, philosophy gives her full and final diagnosis. Since you are overwhelmed by forgetfulness of your nature, you grieve at being an exile and deprived of your goods. Indeed, since you are not aware of the end of all things, you think that base and wicked men are powerful and happy. And since you have forgotten with what rudders the world is steered, you think the earth is tossed about by chance without a pilot. These things are great enough to cause not just illness, but even death. So I like that little excerpt there, and I think it sets. Well, Manzi was telling me how it connects to the idea of God's will and man's will, and I that really I was like, oh my gosh, and it really I agreed with that heavily. So that sets the stage. I don't if anyone does. Yusha, did you already want to talk, Rhea?
No, that was just an example for if anyone's new and doesn't know how to get in queue to talk.
All right. Well, do you have any opinions about what I just said? Just put you on the spot there. What's up? Oh, you've told me some opinions. Now, vocalize them to the rest of us.
He's throwing the ball at you. No pressure.
Yeah, of course, no pressure. It's coming from Marcus. The bar set real low. So, anyways, I think it's great in how the excerpt kind of talks about it definitely talks about the philosophy and religion aspect of it, but it also engages the person or whoever's reading it to think about it from a third point of view. Think about it from a third point of view, where they're just thinking about the situation from a generic, normal human perspective, as opposed to a strict philosophical or a strict religious point of view, to say that, okay, this is what I am and this is who I am. So when it comes down to being that person, or being in the being of it, it pretty much explains itself that, oh, hey, okay, so this is who I am, and I have the freedom to be what I want to be. So for example, today I feel like, woodworking. So today I'm a carpenter. Tomorrow I feel like coding something. Tomorrow I might be a software developer or engineer or whatever. So when it comes down to that aspect of it, the choice and the freedom is pretty evident, especially when it comes down to solely basing off of an argument of the excerpt that you were reading right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I like. You got me thinking now. That's why I wanted someone else to talk, because then I get thinking too.
Yeah, Mansi wants to speak.
Go Manzi.
You're muted.
Okay,
yeah.
Interrupt, but I just want to say really quickly how much I appreciate the passage that Marcus selected and he shared with us. I think it's a very compelling passage in its own right, and also when you contextualize it within the greater tradition of philosophy, and that book as a whole, in fact, it's called The Consolation of Philosophy. It's a dialogue. It's just like Plato wrote. And indeed, he's very similar to Socrates. He's facing death in the morning. Plato Socrates talks to the laws, like the law personified. And then, of course, you have here, young Boethius speaking to philosophy personified. At any rate, yeah. So I was considering this passage, and really Boethius in general, when I was trying to develop some questions to kick off things. So one of the questions that was included in the email says, is there a reality to notions of fate or destiny? If so, then in what ways might these notions, namely fate or destiny, either limit or enhance our human freedom? So Boethius's conjecture is that, well, listen, God has supreme knowledge. Again, he's speaking of the Christian God. And human beings are free. how are those two ideas compatible? He comes up with this idea of essentially what time is, which is, I think, a topic that Orlando suggested a while ago. But okay, let me cut to the chase here. Do you think it's possible that one can be free and also, how to put this, somehow determined? Because again, Boethius was thinking about God. If God knows what you're going to do before you do it, how can you say you're free? That's kind of like a real easy way to put it. But it is a good question. But another way to, I mean, you could substitute, if you wanted to, for the sake of argument, you could substitute God for anything. Like, for example, okay, y'all are young men, but you're getting older.
Wow.
Do you notice that? Have you noticed that maybe you start exhibiting traits that your family or your parents or your brothers have exhibited, and like you're like, I don't know why I'm behaving like this, but not necessarily that you don't want to, but just like, oh wow, I picked up these traits. I thought I was choosing to, like, I don't know, laugh a certain way. You don't really choose to laugh a certain way. I guess you're choosing not to laugh. But if you choose something that has to do with a demonstration of, I suppose, your personality that shows itself through physical gesture articulation, and you notice, oh, it's so funny that my parents do the same thing when they talk. Is that freedom or determinism? I mean, so we don't necessarily just have to couch it in these grand metaphysical ideas. I mean, we can get much more practical. So yeah, I just want to throw that out there, kind of run the gamut and completely derail the conversation. All right. This has been Professor Manson.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, I like the idea of what he says about forgetting what we are, because you know, when you think about it, you know, mankind was their will, or what was, you know, driving the force of, you know, the quote soul back then, or years and years and thousands of years ago, is inherently different than what drives us and what, you know, affects us and leads us nowadays. I feel like in the modern world, you know, because you know, we wake up inside a shelter, you know, in a bed, and then we turn off the bed, put some slippers on, walk from there to a kitchen, make some coffee, put some shoes on, walk out of the house to a car, go from a car to another building, you know. And it feels, I think, weird the more of, you know, like man structure you see and less of, you know, God structure, like nature. I feel is almost like you're almost cutting yourself off from a conversation with God that you would otherwise be having, or you know, connection, a closeness that you could otherwise have. But rather, we're so focused on progress that it seems that, you know, we've forgotten where, you know, the ground from which we once stood, you know, kind of thing. And I think that is what, you know, she talks about there at the end, and that, you know, that it's causing death or blah blah blah, where we've forgotten that, you know, the world could be steered, etc. You know, because I want us to think about it like in a physical or you know, mathematical way here for a second. Okay, on the edges of space, you know, what's on the outside of space? Okay, you know, what's outside of time? You know, when something exists outside of time, unlike us, you know, because we're bound by it, we're inside of it, we can't escape it. But something that is not ever begun or ended has a bit, quite of a bit of a different nature to it. So us trying to rationalize, you know, a thing with no beginning and end is almost like, you know, it's an exercise in futility, of course, but we can try to understand it. And that's something that has never begun or ended, knowing what is in the circle that has a beginning and end doesn't necessarily compromise, I think, the freedom that exists within that that circle, because it almost goes with it. It's like it's a train. It's no, it's not a train though. There's something about it, but I can't exactly put the words there yet. So if anyone else had some opinions.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
Because I like the example that Nancy mentioned, but it keep me wondering. Because okay, let's say that determinism, and the first thing that was happening is like you had no control, like, but the thing is like once you rationalize that you have that trait, you're faced with the with like with the option, like with like you want to choose whether you continue having this trait or you want to change it. You see, so like for instance, like what is happening in my mind is like maybe both are kind of like connected. Maybe one, which is the determinism, is if you take no control of what's happening, you're determined to something is going to happen. Whatever is determined. But freedom comes when you are able to like extract yourself from the situation and see it and see, hey, do I want this to be the course or not? And take some action that may change it. Now, do we actually have a freedom to do that? That's maybe another type of question. But I feel like in terms of determinism, at least with the example that Nancy was saying, in my case, I can see like they're connected. One is kind of like unconscious, and freedom is once you're conscious. Once you're conscious of what happened, you can change the result of, hey, I'm laughing like this, I don't like it. So I'm gonna work so eventually I don't laugh like that. You see, or maybe, I mean, of course, being philosophical, we can go all around like, oh, maybe you were determined to like recognize that you were laughing like that, and then the determinism was that you were actually laughing eventually like differently. Okay, but that's not the discussion here. The discussion is like I feel like they are very much connected, and they can be more like a passive and active version. And their end result, whether it is like you actually have freedom or not, I mean, eventually we can come to that in this discussion. But I feel like they are they're a bit a little bit of the same. Um, that's what I feel. But okay. I see that Yusha is wanting also to say something.
See, sorry. Um, I like where you guys are taking the conversation when it comes to having the difference between the two. And Marcus, I also get what you're saying about everything being about us being in the bounding of time and whatnot. But see, we don't even know if there is anything bound or unbound by time, because it's again a figment of our creation. We look at things and we try to measure, right? 24 hours in a day, even though it's not exactly 24 hours, 365 days in a year, even though it's not exactly 365 days in a year. So these measurements, these calculations are only for us to be able to put ourselves on a path which can be determined, right? Like birthdays, those are super determined and whatnot. And when it comes down to I think the two aspects of freedom or free will and determinism, I guess, coexist. Why? Because at some aspects you do have full control, right? Whether it's moving, like physical movement or whatnot, you have the freedom to or not to move your hand. Like I talk with my hands a lot. I do it because I'm able to. And other things that are predetermined for us might be stuff like how long we're gonna live, and how much, what's it called, how much money you're gonna make in a year. If you want to look at it through a a a a lens where it suggests that, yeah, God has determined anything and everything for us, but in between we do have choices about how we get it. So that's what makes me think that the two coexist and are actually in line with one another because of those aspects. Like how can I explain it better? So when you're walking, right, or running, say, you're freely moving your legs to go faster and faster and faster progressively, right? That is your freedom. But how fast you breathe because of that act of running is determined. You can't take slow breaths while running. You have to breathe heavy. You have to breathe fast. So I guess that would be the same thing with the time and how we move forward in time.
I mean, but you can, and sometimes it's actually recommended to slow down your own, but you have to make it like, again, you have to be conscious of doing it. You don't do it like,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Unless you're doing it actively, like consciously,
mm-hmm.
I don't think it would fall under anything related to free will, freedom, and the free movement and that kind of stuff, where you are in full control of yourself. Like when
Yeah.
you're drunk, right? Or when you're under the influence. You can't even sign a contract. You can't even make a promise that is legally held up in court. Why? Because you are not in control of yourself. You are not free. You are under the influence of that drug, of that alcohol, or of that substance.
Um,
So the same science would apply here.
um, I like where we're going here. I want to go off of what Manzi had once said earlier. You mentioned, does one existing, what is it? Is it? Oh, what'd you say, Manzi? You said, does one, is it healthy or essentially, is it beneficial or does it? Well, what was the word? What was the wording you used, Manzi? You said when you said, that the idea that God knows everything and whatever, does it? Oh, it enhances. Okay, let me say that. Does it enhance or does it not enhance? I guess one or the other. I don't know. You said something like that. My point here being that the existence of God's will, etc., enhances man's will through the idea of faith. When you think about it like that, um, and I want to argue that there is, well, you know, you're affected by things outside of time, like things that um, we'll get like a little bold here, but whenever you are reminded of a moment in your life, okay, or anything that say you loved, okay, you loved a family member, they died, no matter where you are in space and time or whatever, there's an opportunity for a tug um, and touch to happen. Um, so I would argue that love is above that, sphere of uh, time or whatever. But so that's where God's will, man's will, God's love for man comes into play then, and what that means for men. But that's my 2 cents off that. I noticed John wanted to talk.
Wait. So Marcus, you
Yeah.
only put one aspect of it, right? The
What?
the you only put love as one aspect of something being out of time, like it's timeless, it's not bound by time. If you love someone,
Yeah, I didn't want to get
you
too
love
bold
them,
and
that's about it,
assert,
right?
more than once
But
right now. I didn't.
but what about pain? Pain is equally, if not more powerful, uh, than love, and it too
You're
is
saying
not bound
trauma?
by
So
time.
trauma is what you're saying.
No, not trauma,
The
pain.
opposite of love. So yeah, so pain is trauma. So you felt a
No,
childhood whip. You grow up and you see the same belt hanging on your dad's wall. You're like, oh shit,
No,
I
I
got
don't think
shivers.
pain
It's
is the
like
same as trauma because you don't need to be traumatic to feel pain. Like, so, like I mean, if
we're
I'm grabbing
talking
a hot,
about the parts of the human being that can be scarred, okay, and that or it can be touched, okay, in a way that that time doesn't necessarily. It's a tree, okay. A tree has physical markings. It doesn't bear non-physical attributes to it, but a human, anything that's not a physical scar, like inherently doesn't exist in time. Like bottom line, because it doesn't exist. So tell me that it exists in time. That's like saying the thought of a table exists in time. No, it doesn't, because it doesn't exist. Okay, it's just the idea of the form. So everything that we think or whatever, blah blah blah, feel is kind of outside of time in a way. You know what I'm thinking? You know what I'm saying? In a way, it's like a pit inside of us. All right, yeah, I'm done. I'm done. So,
okay.
John, I believe is one to talk, and then Professor Ulrich.
No, it's just in the professor.
I was going to go off of something you just said, but I'm going to yield my time at this point.
Okay, but all right. So then, Luca, but do you still want to talk, John?
We can circle back if I exclamation point again.
I
Okay.
gotcha.
Okay, so we're hitting on a lot. um,
Now you know why I deferred my time.
so I wanted to try to organize everything, to try to put it in a couple pictures so that our ideas can be organized. So we're talking about different types of determinism. There can be a social determinism. So where we grow up and the society that we're in seems to shape us. The institutions that we go through shape us. There's a possible biological determinism. Someone talked about, you get drunk, you don't really get the choice over. You can't say, well, I don't want to feel drunk anymore. Well, that's just how your body functions, and there's aspects of the way that your body functions that we don't seem to have any control over. It's the unfolding of our DNA. There's the theological, the grandest type of determinism we can think of okay, maybe if we can even find this idea of freedom, well, there might be a deterministic idea of God, which is outside of everything, which I am the here a crude metaphor is thinking about going down a slide is the beginning and ending of life. Well, if God sets me down the slide, I got to go down the slide. And whatever the slide is just the whatever the plan of God is. And so no matter what, I'm going down that slide. I start at the top, I ended at the bottom. There's historical ideas of determinism. We're born at a certain period of time, and ideas that would be had 500 years from now, I can't have right now, because the place that I am and where I'm born and when I'm born seems to shape the way that I think and interact with the world. So with all of these ideas of determinism, now we're looking at, okay, what would our idea of freedom look like? How is it going to emerge from these different ideas of it? By the way, I want to connect to previous discussions we had. So when we talked about Marxism, Marx looks at the society that we're in, and he's recognizing, yes, it shapes the way that people are, and so he wants to change the society to change the way that people are shaped. And using this idea of God as outside of time, I don't know if that ends the discussion, because then you get the same problem with God and whether God has actually any free will or not. So is God just churning out these forms and ideas? And is God also a determined being, almost a machine churning itself out? And so the best way I can think of thinking about freedom is in two ways. We either get a freedom from something which is blocking us from the outside. So when we grow up, our parents are keeping us from doing whatever we want. As we get older, maybe God's out there keeping us from doing whatever we want. So let's assume we remove all barriers and we can do anything that we want. Well, then we still have the problem of I can't play piano because I never learned how to play piano. So there has to be another side, which is a developmental side of developing ideas of freedom. And it's hard to know where to place freedom then on the axis there of, well, there's some things, if I develop it, are those the only things that are free? If I choose to develop it, are ways that I was taught from my upbringing, are those type of freedom? Because I didn't choose to be taught that, I was just taught that. But at the same time, I'm taught the alphabet, right? So we're not just taught things that are completely deterministic, because I can make creative sentences with deterministic alphabets that I was given. So it's a strange it's a strange question, and it's the one area in philosophy where I don't have something good. I don't have something good to express here. I haven't figured out a way of talking about it to make it an ultra clear area, but that's what I've got so far. Hopefully, trying to give a summary of what we've been saying.
So humble, so humble.
That was great.
Yeah. If only Mansi was like that. So humble.
By the way, I did also want to say one more thing, because somebody was talking about giving answers to maybe problems of pain and suffering and God, and maybe not having free will, and talking about, well, maybe it's a lesson from God, and maybe it's out of love and things like that, which that could also be a possibility. I don't know if that necessarily solves the problem, but it does at least place the problem within a narrative where we can make sense of it. So, okay, that's what I got.
Okay. But before we move on, George texted something. He said, limits on free will if it seeks, if it exists, one, circumstances of our birth, genetics, and upbringing, two, circumstances of the choice itself, and three, physical necessity. All right. So I just wanted to say that out. And then you mentioned something that it does keep me thinking, but now I'm forgetting what was it, and it's important. I hate when that happens. Think, Ferdinando, think. And I didn't think, but it's okay. I can always just say something else. All right. And I don't remember what I was gonna say. I hate it.
I'm sorry, George. Before you say what you're about to, or Fernando, I do want to say that I think we might have a problem with terminology, because it
Mhm.
almost seems as if I need something deterministic to be free. So I have to have like a deterministic meter stick where I can have the freedom to go measure anything in the world. But I have to have. It seems that there has to be something deterministic, some type of standard, which I can use to then freely use that thing to express and to go. And same thing with the alphabet that I was talking about, a deterministic thing which then I can use creatively in some sort of way. So a type of compatibilism. Uh, Maybe you can think about how you would do that with the human body. I don't know.
With the human body. Oh, you mean like wanting to like fly or something like that?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I like that. But like, I mean, okay, but this is the thing. Are we talking about freedom of choice or freedom of doing whatever you want? Because then
We're
we have
talking
to
about
be a little bit more
freedom.
specific.
We're just
In general,
freedom. Freedom is freedom.
yeah, but I don't think you're understanding my question, Marcus. Because like both are different. Like physical
No, the
and
fact
like,
that we think they're different is the problem. The only thing that we're going after here is just freedom. Like, well, you said, what'd you say? Freedom of decision, freedom of choice. Is that what you said?
no, because okay, yeah, we're not free to just like fly, but we're free to do other stuff. I mean,
Okay,
we cannot physically fly, but we have the freedom of trying to figure it out how we can
so
fly,
you have
even
the
if our body
ability
doesn't
to.
have.
Okay, you're thinking about freedom of like. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, you're right. But
Yeah,
there's
because yeah, there's a difference because yes, you're not free to fly with your body, but you're free to choose not to accept it and look for a way on how to do it, even if your body cannot. So I guess to some degree I understand what Lucas is saying. Like there has to be something deterministic for you to set the ground rule of what freedom is. But if you're
Right.
truly free, it wouldn't matter what exists. You just kind of like you want something that we cannot even conceive in our mind. It's something so abstract that we cannot even think right now because we are that limited. Like we want freedom, but we in our limitality, is that a thing? I mean, I think like our mind, our body is not big enough to actually have freedom as what freedom is, because we cannot do everything, because we cannot imagine everything, we cannot think of everything, like we cannot create new colors. Like you want new colors, probably you want to be the new one who create this color, but can you think of a new color? And if you want to create a new color, you have to use something that you already used before, right? Like you cannot just like, I create a new element. Like it doesn't happen that way. I think that we're very limited, and no matter how much we want freedom, we cannot completely get freedom, but we can expand our freedom options as much as we continue exploring the universe. That's what I'm thinking. Um, but okay, for now, I'm just gonna pass the ball to George, and then Nancy wants to say something.
I think Lucas and I were kind of coming at this the same way, where we're trying to get an understanding of how free can we be exactly. Like, what are the like, obviously we don't have the freedom to fly or whatever, just or have superpowers or whatever, like Fernando was saying. So I could think of like 3 different things that kind of limit that freedom. The circumstances of our birth and our genetics and our upbringing, right? So we can't choose those things. I'll skip to number 3, physical necessity. Okay, so we can't fly, we can't think of an impossible color, right? We can't run faster than the speed of sound, or if we start running, right, and we keep running, right, we're going to breathe heavier, right? Like what Marcus was saying, we can't choose that, right? Or if we have a mental illness or a physical illness, right, that can limit what we are free to do. And then number 2, I'm going to say that reason actually limits us to a certain extent, assuming that you're not going to do something stupid on purpose or something that's going to harm you on purpose. Your freedom is limited in that sense. Like, if you're choosing between a vanilla and a strawberry milkshake, and you know that the strawberry milkshake is poisoned, you're indeed free to pick the strawberry milkshake, but because you're not stupid, you're going to pick the vanilla one, even if you might prefer strawberry. That's more of a soft limitation, right? You could still theoretically choose the other one, but oftentimes, if we're acting in our self-interest, we find that our options are limited because we don't want to do dumb things and we want good outcomes for ourselves. So Lucas brought a good question there at the end. It was something to the effect of what sorts of freedom can we have? And I'm going to suggest that we have, if free will exists, because obviously you can have, limit number 4, you can have God or fate in a supernatural universe who just determines everything, or in an atheistic deterministic universe, physical necessity here, option 3, ends up just covering everything, where everything is just the result of atoms in motion in the universe and everything's determined by physical forces entirely. Okay, so assuming that we're not in one of those universes and we do have some amount of free will, I think we have the ability to make choices about our lives and our actions from a limited set of possibilities. 2, we have the freedom to act morally or immorally, as much as we're able to understand those things, right? Given our circumstances. And 3, we have the freedom to express our creativity. Freedom to express our creativity, again, given our circumstances. So I think the conversation would be more focused if we could all agree that that's the sort of freedom we were talking about, right?
Yeah, that was part of what I was trying to say. Like, I think that we
Yes.
needed to be a little bit more specific. That was why, like, what type of freedom are we referring to?
So if we can agree there, I think that would be helpful. And just my 2 cents, I think that sort of freedom is compatible with the idea of God existing and even God knowing things in advance. Maybe the conversation here moves in that direction at some point if people find it interesting. But I just thought I'd put that out
Okay.
there.
So I'm gonna add a little bit more, just to kind of like, because I that's what I do. I always just kind of like considering ideas. So essentially, what you're saying is like our freedom is limited, but it expands not by accident, but it's because of a design that God is like they are not ready to know this, but eventually they will know it, and they will gonna become more free the more time passes.
Yeah, I think that God has given us the ability to be free in those 3 areas that I mentioned, and maybe there's one I'm not thinking of. Where we can make moral choices, we can make decisions from a limited set of circumstances, and we can express creativity.
All right. So for me, that's interesting, and it brings a little bit more of extra caveat because first, that will make freedom, as I think Ulrich was mentioning, deterministic, because then we are determined to become free eventually. But the thing is, like, if that path actually happens, like, wouldn't that mean that eventually we're gonna be free, and we're gonna remove determinism like completely? But it's a very deterministic way to achieve freedom. But well, I mean, it's just a thought. Okay, so I see Mansi is next.
Hey, again, fantastic contributions. Really, really awesome conversation. Yeah, just building a little bit on this, striving towards clarity and terminology and stuff like that. I mean, it is, and I'm going to try to sort of synthesize a lot of these points. On the one hand, when we use the term free will, that is a specifically Christian term. That term comes out of Christianity, and it has everything to do with generally speaking, the overall Christian notion of the quote-unquote one true God. So the idea is that there is God's will, thy will be done. Maybe you've heard that in a prayer once or twice. And what that's implying is that it's God's will that human beings live a certain way, be a certain way, be what they were designed to be by God himself. So when we're talking about freedom in that context, when we're talking about exercising our free will, what we're really talking about is whether or not we're using the gifts. Again, I'm speaking hypothetically in terms of the Christian perspective. We're using the gifts God gave us in a way that is either against his will, which is to say against the way in which perhaps something like reason was intended to function among humanity, or we're going towards it. So this is where freedom comes in. Human freedom is something of a difficulty, because if you're behaving in a way that you're sort of ignoring the nature of things and you're ignoring maybe the morality of things, yes, you're free, but what's happening is that if you're a Christian, your soul is suffering. So yes, you're free, but you're probably unhappy, and you certainly won't be happy in the afterlife. So the idea is getting back to this compatibilism, if you want to use that ism. Yes, I do think that given the nature of the world, again, sticking with this Christian perspective, given the way, not just the way, but also the result of God's creation, there are going to be inherent opportunities to test our freedom. So, for example, God wants us to deny our nature. Okay, our nature is that we're animalistic, we're carnal. This is original sin. And so what we have to do is fight against our body, use our reason to fight against our body, in that way, and in that way be more godlike. And that is when your freedom can be enhanced by, pick a term. We just say mitigating factors. So, for example, you might ask, well, what if the world was different? What if our human bodies were different? If God made the world different, well, then our freedom would change, right? And the answer Christians have is no, because this is the perfect version. There is no other world. This is the world with very great detailed intention behind it, allegedly. So that's the idea there of human free will. When we talk about freedom and determinism, then we can get a bit more, I suppose, general. We could talk about, again, all the different determinisms that Luke was bringing up. But yeah, if you do want to stick to this Christian context and using things like free will, I mean, yeah, our free will is a result of our incompetence as a human species, as children of God. And so we have to use our freedom to try to get back in line with, again, being more godlike, which for the Christians means being more rational, being less determined by bodily impulse.
Okay.
Really, I love where this is going. So I want to imagine, free will, or the idea that there is even a way to use your free will, kind of like a math equation. Okay. Please forgive my shaky camera if it starts shaking a lot. But so the fact that I have a blank page here. Okay, nothing exists yet. Time hasn't started. Okay, the Big Bang starts. All right. So the equation begins, and I'm just gonna write some random bullshit. Okay, don't start doing algebra on me here. All right, it's just for a point. All right. So the point being, I'm just gonna do x blah 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 minus blah blah squared. Oh, square root of everything under 2 minus. Oh gosh. Okay. So it's really complicated. this is the equation, the question, okay, that now exists when humans arise. You now have to answer the question of how to live as a human. Okay, it's an equation to solve, and everyone's way of living, their use of free will, is their, probably ill attempt at trying to solve this. It's trying to solve this equation. So everyone's coming out with a different answer to the equation. And so everyone's trying to say, look, my answer is the best. This product is right. You see what step I did here? This is the right step to do. Or no, look at this answer that I have right, And then God's will is essentially telling us that it's like when your teacher, shows, all the problems on the homework, and then you go, well, can you give us an example of how to do it? And then the teacher goes and gives you the example of how to solve the equation of how to live. And then you try to do what that example has set forth. You try to do exactly that. And so by doing that, you solve or are in the process of solving and becoming what a human is meant to be then. I think that's a good way to look at it, if that makes any sense.
Sorry, Marcus, your mic was off.
But I love thinking of it like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Because thinking of the question, a question is an answer, it's something to be answered. An equation, something to solve. How to live, question, equation, solution, formula, how to live, doing it right, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah,
So you
blah.
can then say that doing so accordingly to God's will is the proper PEMDAS way of solving that equation through your will. You're using your free will in accordance to the proper way to solve it, so you get a nice end result and not one that doesn't make any sense and then fails to use the equation properly. So it never blossoms into a nice, gradient line that you can graph. It's just got scatter points all over the place. So you're like, well, this means nothing.
Marcus, yeah, I like what you're saying. I'm mulling it over as you're speaking. Great points, by the way. But yeah, let me kind of ask you. Let me ask everybody this. When it comes to things such as again, and we'll just call it human will, human freedom. Maybe that's the better term for it. Human freedom. I can't help but wonder: is it possible to have freedom without any standard by which to judge it? And you're kind of getting at that, I feel. So another way to put it would be this: is freedom somehow a negative definition that's based upon simply a lack of determinism? So whenever you're not determined, is that what we're calling free? Or is freedom something more positive? You're free to do things. And a lack of that freedom, now that's what we call being determined or being imprisoned or enslaved or whatever the case may be. What do you think?
Like
So is your question essentially, are we red-pilled or are we blue-pilled? Because that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, like the Matrix. I think he was stating, yeah.
I like the latter definition.
Matrix.
Okay.
I mean, I actually like both, and I think both are equally plausible.
Well, I only bring this up because, and this might be unique to me, but I remember feeling very free when I was like a very young child. But
yeah,
that was most rules imposed on me, and yet I felt that it is kind of a weird paradox, like the actual human feeling of freedom. And now when I look back, I'm like, well, I guess my feelings were incorrect because I really wasn't free. Or do I look back and I think, no, I was free to do the things that I was capable of doing because of the rules that were in place.
Yeah. Ignorance is a bliss. You were not aware, you were not free, so you feel free. And now that you know,
Something like
it. All right. But I mean, there is a lot to read, so I'm going to read it. First is from Yusha saying, thank you, Luca. That is what I was trying to explain. My idea of why I believe that freedom and determinism coexist is because we need something deterministic to be able to even think of freedom. Example, I am a slave where everything for me is set as a specific time. Down to the second, I can dream of freedom only when I am a slave. On the contrary, a free man will never know what freedom is because he does not know of what it means of being a slave. Then John says, is that limited to physical freedom? We could be slaves to our minds or emotions. It's been a little bit more specific. Then, for example, I was a slave to my active drug alcohol addiction. That form of slavery was physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Does God make agnostics free? Hmm. Then Jesus said, John, that is why I kept a slave as an open term. Also, George, if we are narrowing down to one aspect of freedom, why are we leaving determinism so open? We need to have a balance on either side. Then John said, yeah, Dante. And Marcus already spoke, so I'm going to skip that part. If this is the perfect word, we are chaka, 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 chaka. There is a lot of asterisk there. I cannot say it here. I'm so sorry. But I got the message. Then you said, I see, Mansi, a hat. No, I see a hat you are saying, and I believe that if we look at the two aspects since birth, things are more determined from us when we lack experience. As and we gain experience, we tend to be more free.
Good point.
Yep. And then he has the floor if you want to speak. And then it will be Luca, and then again John, if maybe he wants to speak, of course.
Yeah, I was sitting with the client and I told him I need to leave to do something. But yeah, I'll just make it quick and try to summarize the 2 points that I spoke about in the comments. That what's it called? If see we know of freedom, for example, I'll put you under the spotlight, John, through the experiences that you went through. Now hopefully that you're in a recovery phase, or that you have already recovered, you know, now you know that you were enslaved to those things when you were consuming them, right? Same thing for me. I tend to, what's it called, I tend to obsess over things that I'm told that I cannot do. For example, if you tell me that I cannot run a a certain amount of distance in a certain amount of time, I'll keep going at it until I can, just to prove someone wrong. So that's my vice. And all of us have our vices, right? Not We do not know that we're slaves to those vices until and unless we overcome them, or we are made to know of them. And again, which becomes, we know of them because we are either overcoming them like through the process, or we have already done ourselves better to be better than what we used to be. Here, the example that I gave was just a slave, a generic term for any kind of vice, whether it's lust, gluttony, drugs, alcohol, adultery, obsession. You can put anything under the slavery umbrella. So that was my first point. Second point was when you guys were discussing about narrowing down the freedom aspect of things to one specific type of freedom. That got me thinking that, oh, hey, that's a great idea. Instead of having these two, the other side very open and vast, why not try to be more specific about exactly what sort of determinism are we talking about? Whether things that are determined for us on a human level, on a personal level, on a astrological level, on a celestial level, on a religious level, whatever you want to put it down. But I would like to see that we bring the determinism aspect of things to a more direct and a simpler terms, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And last but not least, Nancy, I heard you were speaking about this right before me as well, but you were talking about the opposite aspect, that now that you are grown, you find yourself to be more restricted, more limited, to say. But how I look at it, that a child is born and everything is, rather, if you're looking at it from an outside perspective, everything is determined for the child: when it's going to feed, when the diaper's going to be changed, when it's going to go for sleep, nap time, study time, school time, blah blah blah. And as and when we grow up, we tend to be more free, that oh, hey, like today I came into work at 12. Usually I'm here since 8, But today I was like, you know what? I work flexible hours. I'll just go in at 12. So as and when we grow up, whether it's finance, whether it's social activities, whether it's personal activities or anything of sort, we become more free as we gain more experience. And that's why we cannot leave people of special needs unattended, because they don't necessarily come out of the barrier where enough experience is required to do something, right? Like managing finances. We in the US, we tend to get our credit cards right around the 16 to 18 years of age mark. And up until then, you have a secure credit card where, for example, you put down $500 and your spending limit is only $500. As opposed to the open credit card where you don't have to put down anything as a contingent, you can spend whatever you want. So as and when we learn more about finances, we get higher credit limits. And same thing applies to any aspect of life, like college students. Most of us, I mean, aside from the adults and the professors, most of us are college students. And whether to show up for class or not, another freedom. Take it back to high school. You did not have a choice whether to show up or not to show up for class, because if not, then it would be a truancy court for you. So if we look at it through that aspect, I think we get to see that we get to better see the point that I was trying to make earlier in a very horrible setting, that I believe that the two things coexist and they have to coexist. Without one, the other cannot be, even as an assumption.
Okay. I'm not gonna add much because we already have two people in the queue. We are about to touch the 1 hour, so I don't want to make it too long, but the conversation is very interesting. So again, go ahead, Professor Luca, and then John.
I'll let John go since time's running out and he didn't get to say his piece before.
Okay.
Well, like Professor Ulrich mentioned, especially since we're forgetting to refer to him as Professor Ulrich.
Lucas is fine.
This is an awful lot to unpack in one thing, which is great because it's part of what makes this such a fun club to be a part of. However, I'll circle back to, as much as I want to go back to Manzi's point. If I'm agnostic, does God set me free? I forget who brought that point up, but there's a reason why I asked it in the chat. If I'm agnostic, I mean, or if I'm atheist or anything like that, does God set me free? I understand that I specifically avoided the atheist argument because it's easier to defeat.
Okay.
I don't think the agnostic one is.
What makes the agnostic one easier? And what is that chicken?
What chicken?
There's
Yusha.
a chicken hanging out with Yusha.
Really?
There was.
I don't see any chicken there.
No, but yeah, I mean, John, I'm curious because, I mean, I guess it would depend on the sort of the religious or ideological context. I mean, again, I think if you were to ask a Christian, agnostics are, yeah, they're still sort of fallen in terms of their rationality. They haven't realized the true nature of things, which is to say, God's existence. But I think if you ask, what it sounds like your perspective to be, somebody from there, where it's like, well, if I no longer subscribe to the doctrines of this one true God, then aren't I free from that? Aren't I free now from the obligations, the moral obligations, perhaps, but more specifically, like the obligations of worship, things along these lines, which are, a lot of responsibility for any self-proclaiming card-carrying Christian. So,
Or am I permanently in Dante's Inferno?
Or for Dante's.
Yeah, that was C.S. Lewis's response. Is that he said to be with God is to be in love, and to choose against it, punishment happens by definition because you're outside love. It's not as if God's punishing you. It's you're outside what enjoyment is supposed to be, and to choose to be outside of that is just to choose to be in pain.
Huh. So by that definition, then they're
I like that a
saying
lot.
God is love.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's the way that he explained it in like chapter 4 or something of Mere Christianity.
Cool. But since John already finished his part, do you want to say something else or no?
Oh, do I
Or-
want to? Oh,
Yes.
I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, I think what I was going to respond because somebody somebody said about different ideas of somebody said something about different ideas of freedom, and it just popped in my head. The Greek idea that I wanted to share is you're free within a boundary. So Poseidon's free over the boundary of the sea, and human beings are free. But if you look at Icarus, when he flies too high, he starts going out of his boundary. Things start unfolding. So they still have the idea of freedom, but they keep freedom within as long as you stay being a human. When you try to get outside of that, that's when bad things start happening. And so they connect freedom to the idea of destiny and the idea of what your fate is supposed to be. Your fate is the fate to be a human, and to try to not be that. So a lot of things we've been talking about is, well, how do we get out of being a human? And the Greek would say the exact opposite. He's like, no, you're only free when you are a human. If you try to get outside of those boundaries, the thing that makes you a very human, that's asking for disaster. That's going completely off course. So they kind of flip the discussion on its head and place freedom only within the boundaries of being a human. That's where. So you're free to be a human.
I see. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have a couple of things. One from Yusha. He said he actually opposed that of love because he says if someone is not in love, then are they in pain or they deserve to be punished? In my case, I don't think they're talking about being in love. It's just love in general. But that's how I perceive it. But I don't know if maybe I hear it wrong.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you why. Like what that means is like it's you not understanding why things happen. So you're in pain and anguish. Like remember in the quote that I was reading in the beginning, he's in anguish, because of these things that he doesn't understand because he is too far from the lifeline of God, which is the truth, the end all be all. So when you're with that, then everything that happens, there's no pain, or it's harder to perceive it as, oh, why did this happen to me? Because you're in line with that, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
So to simplify, then what you're saying, essentially, you're saying that in love is not necessarily love, it's but like positive feelings. While if you are removing from positive feelings, then you're just bad feelings. Is that? I don't know. It's very oversimplifying things, but I think that's the simplest way to put it. It's like it's
No,
not like, oh, I love someone. It's just like you feel love in the term like you feel like
no. Well,
excited about life. You feel like something's happening, something like that.
well, we were talking about, God is love, and so and then how do you align with? We were talking about that, and what that means is, so when you don't, well, they were saying that. So when you don't lie, in love or whatever, does that mean you exist in pain?
Yeah,
That
because I
the
also
love,
want to touch
the
another
love can
point.
be considered the truth, okay, and the pain can be considered the confusion of not understanding why the world the way it is, because you are not in line with the truth, which is the love of God. Then from that perspective,
Okay, because John also disagreed, but he said that from a completely different perspective than you, Shaq. And I'm gonna read your comment, Marcus. It says, "Pain because you do not lie with within the truth, so you do not understand the end of things. So things that happen can hurt because you don't understand why." Okay, but John, do you want to explain your perspective?
Only because we're time limited. No, I'll just stick to pointing it out. I'm sure it'll wrap into a future subject because Lewis comes up quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay, but can you just like at the very least introduce it? Because then it just
and he was a bit of a screw tape.
Nice.
because then you're just bringing something up, and then it's like, yeah, but I would touch it like in 3 years. Because eventually Lewis will come in 3 years.
You know our club well enough. It will not take 3 years. It may take 2 weeks.
I know. I'm not concerned about that. And my concern is whether I'm gonna be in that meeting or not. You see? So
Yeah, because you're so known for not being here. You'll be here.
what if it is in
I'm
person?
more likely to not be here.
Well, and you're the one who is bringing it up. Come on, you see? You cannot leave things to fate. We don't know what our freedom will take us. Are we fate to be in the next meeting? We don't know. You have to take today. You have to take today. I mean, this is the thing. Yeah, we are in about an hour, but we have lasted meetings of like 2 hours and a half, 3 hours. Easy, easy. So that's not an excuse. You're running away like a chicken, like the chicken that Yusha had in his video. You're running away. Yes, say yes, say yes, say yes. No, it didn't work. Oh my god, this is so disappointing.
I'm a libertarian. You keep saying say it, say it. I'm gonna turn my
Okay,
finger up at you.
so don't say it. So don't say it. Don't
Wait,
say
wait,
it.
wait, wait,
Don't
wait.
say-
So, okay, since it was brought up, since my comment was brought up, I was hoping that we touch up on it in the next meeting. But what you guys were just talking about, that I understand that the love mentioned is not the traditional love, like the feeling or the emotion, but it see how sadistic it is that if you don't do this one thing, it's like religion all over again. If you don't love God, or you deserve to be in hell. No, I mean there's no guarantee for it, right? And not knowing is not always bad, because if, for example, how do I put it? See, I don't, as Marcus was mentioning, for one who not loves is an anguish or something. That's not necessarily true. Why? Because I might not love the thing, not in traditional sense, of course. I might not be towards or leaning towards something because not because I hate it. It's because maybe I follow something else, right? And I'll again bring in the fallacy, or the appeasing to a higher power fallacy into this, because that is exactly what we have fallen into towards the end of the meeting, um, where we're saying that, okay, yeah, things are determined for us to some extent, but on the contrary, we are also free to do things that are not even connected to anything. And when we bring it into things like, okay, if you're not loving it, you're either in pain or in anguish, or however you want to put it, because of blah blah blah. Because why? Who said so? I mean, right? And it's the same aspect in religion, where, see, I'm a Muslim, right? I practice Islam. I follow it very strictly and very closely, and to the best I can, right? But I cannot help but think, where we are told that, okay, if you don't do this or this blah blah blah, you're going straight to hell, right? And what's the guarantee for it? Is there a predecessor, precursor? If there's something that can tell me, that can confirm that, okay, this was done before and this was the reaction, like science, right? Science is direct. You can repeat the experiment, you can expect the same outcome, or you can differentiate the experiment and expect a different outcome depending on what you're doing. But us being put into this situation and saying that, oh, if one does not love, they're in anguish, that's I think that's pretty on the, I guess, arguable side of things, to say the least.
Yeah, I agree. It's arguable. I'll defend Lewis. It's strange. People think when I defend certain positions that I agree with them, but I view all thought systems as enclosed. So when I was defending Marxism, I was like, "Are you a Marxist?" Like, no, I think they're self-enclosed systems, and they make sense within that self-enclosed system. So the Christian answer, by definition, works, because they're the one that makes the definition, and the definition is being under the umbrella of God is always the good thing. So if you're not, it's just like eating bad food makes you unhealthy. Why? Because by definition, that's how bodies work. So when Christianity says that this is how a body works, this is how a life works, and to function this way, just this is what it means to live a good life. Well, it's hard to argue against that because it's by definition true. Now we could just reject the whole system, and I would say, okay, but rejecting the whole system. But it works within their system. It's a nice self-contained system, and of course now you're talking about Islam. You say, well, here's another self-contained system that's similar, and yeah, it's hard to know what to do with those parallel systems. I think that's where interesting conflict and battle back and forth goes. But yeah, for me, I look at things as a system, and you have to reject them or not reject them is a whole thing. But that's all I have to say.
See, you said they work well within their systems, right?
Correct.
Whether
correct.
it's I'm just picking up on certain key aspects that you were mentioning there, and what. See, look back to the Crusades, not too far long ago, right? Christianity came up and thought that, okay, we practice this and we believe it to be true, so we're going to impose and force it on others, on everyone. Why? Because Hinduism, oh, that's false. Why? Because they don't conform to our society. They don't conform to our beliefs. They don't fall within our systems, right? Muslims came along for that matter. They started off in Mecca and Medina, and they expanded from there to rule the entirety of the Europe, including Turkey and most part of England, and some parts up until the US, the northern US, and almost all parts of the southern US for more than 800 years. Why? Because they thought that, okay, we need to spread this because this conforms to our system. We believe it to be perfect, and it is contained within our very limited sight or scope of vision. But when we say that, okay, we have this in Islam, which is good. It helps the society. Like we have a system we call zakat, right? We pay 2.5% of all our income that we've held for more than a year to any charity, to any person who is needy for it. Why? Because our societies work that way. We help one another within the society. I'm sure Christianity does the same thing in some aspect, Judaism. Instead of taking what is productive from each of these belief systems, these self-sustained ecosystems, we try to impose the entirety of it instead of picking and choosing that. Okay, prayers come from, for example, Christianity, right? We talk directly to God. The helping the society comes from Islam. The wealth management or the proper religiously managing wealth comes from Judaism, and the spiritual aspect or the metaphysical aspect connected to the physical aspect comes from Buddhism or Hinduism or whatever. Instead of doing that, we try to impose only one side of the story to others. Why? Because that is just what sells. Again, taking back to the
Yeah,
Turkish Empire and the Christian Empire.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you completely. It is what sells. Being able to cut out one piece and try to point at it without any context and saying this is bad, this is wrong. Yeah, it's easy to do in any system, which is you can take anything that the U.S. does and just look. It's like, well, yeah, they're bombing a lot of people right now in over 40, 50 different countries. And but the thing is that's outside of looking at why this occurred historically, why it occurred, and why it unfolded, why we're doing it, what's the goal of what's doing it, because they also have a system. And so, yeah, I mean, it makes these things difficult to talk about.
Okay. But I do have to read a couple of things and why this thing is happening right now. Oof. Okay, but we do have aliens here, though. I just want to say this. One of our comments come from an alien. Yeah, like this is weird. They exist, that's for sure. But this alien, he says, so okay, he said, by this concept, if everyone follows God, are we perfectly free or perfectly determined? which Marcus, of course, laughed at the alien because they didn't exist before, right? They were all green and big-headed and whatever. And he said, with the contingencies or whatever. And the alien continues. He said, I am just following the logic used to an extreme. So the end goal shouldn't be thought of. Lol. And then John, he says, I will never ascribe a person to a belief strictly because they make an argument. When we do so, we stifle free exchange. There were also a few people who did the same thing on 9/11, previous statement to Yusha's spoken point. And then George he says, I'd be interested in exploring the self-contained system. Observation another time. What Proof Ulrich pointed out is something that has also occurred to me. It seems to me that everyone operates within a self-contained system in one way or another. How are we supposed to evaluate someone else's system when we ourselves are in our own? How can we get to the truth if we are stuck inside our own system? Which is to some degree also like the problem with freedom, that we can only analyze freedom through our point of view and we cannot actually comprehend what freedom is. Um, and then John wants to speak.
So I'd temporarily retract my previous statement about Lewis, and I will go read a little bit of the Ransom trilogy because that's one thing of his I haven't read yet. And since that's heavily influenced by Dante, I'll reform my opinion based on that.
Nice, nice. By the way, if anybody wants to read a book, which somebody I was definitely influenced by, this. There's an Alistair McIntyre book called Whose Truth, Which Rationality, which also thinks in things in terms of systems and self-enclosed systems and how they are able to talk to one another.
Mathematically, that's already been explained to an extent.
Ooh.
So the mathematical system would be another system, and the question is its relation to social systems and emotional systems, and but yes, I think that you can find ways to make mathematical systems talk to one another.
All right. Okay. So I'm gonna.
So I would agree with that. I think that's a true statement.
I'm gonna start because we're starting to add new topics, and I think this is a perfect point to start seeing what topics do we want next week, because it seems like you are inspired by our conversation. We inspire you, like our visit from alien invaders, just kind of like we sparkle your creativity. So yes, I guess this is a proper time to start asking for topics for next week, so we can wrap up a little bit this, even though it was not completely explained. But hey, philosophy exists as long as we are humans. So can we really close a topic? Unlikely, but I mean not impossible. Well, anyway,
Orlando, I just want it on the record. I got nothing but love for you. I don't know what this alien stuff's about.
it's in the chat. Like you're not in our group chat. We were making some comment that
Oh,
he's
I
an
am.
alien.
Oh, I am.
No, in the WhatsApp chat, no.
Oh,
Because
I thought
No,
he's
you
the
meant
it's only for
admin.
the
You see,
Teams chat.
offices.
he is the admin, but our admin then got, taken by the aliens. So now aliens are the admin now. So this is
So
it's a
y'all were
private
doing inside
joke.
jokes to
It
everybody
was
else. Got it.
I see. It's a inside joke. That's what we do. Many times we're laughing like ha ha ha, and people outside is like these guys are weird. It's because it's full of inside jokes and outside jokes and in between jokes. It's all jokes for everyone, for all family and non-family stuff. Um, anyways, topics. Do you have any or no? Write out the comments, like and subscribe. This is for YouTube. They do that, so I'm just to let you know. I'm determined to do the same things they do, or not.
Well,
Maybe I can choose
what
to.
came up? What came up at the end here? I mean, one interesting conversation might be: do you need love to be happy? Something else that came up, we could talk about incommensurate systems. That might be a bit heady, but I mean, that's what we're talking about right now. The idea of, is it possible for two systems of thought that's, or two moral philosophies that seem diametrically opposed? Is it possible to have a society where people can hold or have or practice diametrically opposed systems of beliefs?
Can you repeat? Like, is it possible for two diametrically monolith of philosophies? To
Yes.
like,
So in other words, if you wanted to kind of look at it, because we were talking about societies and stuff earlier in the summer. Again, it's like if you want to look at America as an example, I mean, we could just say, is it possible? Again, going back to our conversation on utopias, is it possible for there to be a fully functioning, healthy society, thriving society, where the individuals of that society, that single society under a single government, hold fundamentally disparate or incommensurable beliefs, which is to say they believe in different notions of reality, but they still follow the law.
Well, this is a
How's that?
great introduction
So-
for anarcho-capitalism. I'm just saying.
Yeah, kind of.
Michael Malice. Yeah, that could be
Okay.
a little to break into.
I shrink it to: is it possible for two diametrical opposite morally philosophies to coexist?
Yeah, okay. So even putting it on a very small scale level, do you think it's possible for you to be best friends with somebody if that person doesn't believe anything you believe, in terms of like where we come from, where we're going, what is right, what is wrong? Could you work together?
Be a
Could you?
libertarian and marry a Democrat.
Yeah. Could you be part of the Knights of Columbus together? Stuff like that. To what
I
extent?
mean,
What's that?
I mean, we had Orlando back in the day, so I don't think it's that difficult.
Again, Orlando, I got nothing but love for you, man. I don't know where this is coming from.
We have to teach someone.
So many
And-
political topics lately.
Yeah, and he's the new guy, because he just arrived. No, not okay. Sorry. Yeah, continue, Luca.
No, but Luke, that's a good point. We could switch it up a little bit. We can maybe go more epistemological.
And I will be the first to admit my own guilt in bringing up political topics because I'm incredibly buried in activism right now. So my fault.
Yeah, no worries.
Well, give us some topics that you. I mean, Jeff was putting it in a negative way. We could put it in a positive way. Say what traits do we need to have us come together, or to have stability within our group. But the thing is, that's pretty broad.
I think we would
also.
evolve to. I think if we started
Okay.
from Jeff's perspective, we would evolve to that approach.
Yeah. Maybe what makes for a stable democracy, or
I like
Menzies,
the way
do
you
you
originally
remember?
phrased.
Those words go together.
Do you remember we did a similar thing for our Socratic circle?
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
We could just take that one because none of these guys were there. It was I think it was just me and Daniel Howell that were going back and forth on this.
Well, okay. Well, hang on a sec. Maybe we're limiting our freedom here. Our next topic doesn't have to be determined by. If we want it to. Is there anything that you're talking
Your
about?
internet's in the matrix, Jeff.
I don't know what that means.
It was determined to not be able to say what he wanted to say. So no
All
matter how hard you're trying, you cannot say your suggestion. And now I'm
Did
just what? I'm sorry. I'm just
Yes.
teasing you now. It's too much. It's too much.
Is there anything you want to talk about? Philosophy of birthday cakes. Any topic?
Mm, I mean, we have 3 topics
Philosophy of
so
birthday
far.
cakes sounds good.
Hey, here's an idea. Can we carry forward where Professor Ulrich and I were discussing about the limited scope of each, I guess, group of people and how they only see others through that very specific scope. I don't know how to word it, but I think George, it was you who also commented on it.
Perception.
Yeah, social perception.
Self-contained system. There you go. Yeah, it was you, George. We could do
Perceptions.
self-sustained either political systems or religious systems or just societal systems or something like that. But it has to be something very specific for us to be able to expand on it.
We could do
So-
anything, but it's got to be specific.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Self-contained what again?
Systems.
Self-contained
Yeah, stuff.
systems.
Systems. Okay.
Yes.
We have 4. I think that's a lot right now.
Okay. Cool.
Well, we may even have 5, but it will require me to watch the video of a previous topic. So if George, do you have the wording again so I can add it or no? Because you said, please see my previous post for my suggested topic.
He's
Oh,
talking about the
previous
self.
post. Oh, I thought it was like a previous video. It's like, oh man. Self-contained system. No, it's already here in social perceptions of self-contained system. So it's already included. So yeah, we have 4. I'm gonna post them. Oopa, and now vote. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
What do we have?
Okay. I see a 1. See a 4. Oh, it's getting spicy. I see a 4. It's getting hot. Uh, not necessarily. They're not the same, but they're similar.
Have to be happy.
Well,
Uh,
Marcus is trying to cheat the system. No, it will not happen. It's just 1. Your vote is just 1.
just to
You should try it all the
sorry,
time.
just to clarify the aliens inquiry, if 2 and 4 are the same, they're not, because see in the the second proposition is about coexisting or about finding a way or similarities or anything, like any possible way to coexist for these 2 completely polar or opposite philosophies, people, politics, natures, whatever you want to call it. And number 4 is about it's not about coexisting. It's actually quite the opposite, about either looking at them. I mean, just looking at them in terms of in terms of understanding and studying and perceiving things, or it could be like the entire Crusaders kind of thing. It's
Okay.
just not coexisting.
Okay, with this vote, 4-1. There's no way that 4 doesn't win. So yeah. So the topic for next week will be social perceptions and self-contained systems. So good stuff out there, everyone. Yeah. So that says it. Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for the timely vote. That totally changed my comment. Absolutely. Your vote matter, just not today. So yeah, that's it. We finished the topic. It was fun. Again, check us on social media if you want more information about us. Send a text us. We have everything. We have email, YouTube, website, Instagram, Twitter, and chicken. So yeah, do that. In the meantime, see you next week. And
Yeah. Take care,
think
y'all.
about it.
About it.
Ba, ba, ba.